Before we talk about other people, we have to begin with ourselves, because the pain of feeling unseen, unheard, or unvalued doesn't start in the present moment. It often echoes from much earlier places within us. When someone treats you as if you don't matter, it doesn't just hurt, it awakens something deeper, something familiar. And the real question is not only why they behave this way, but also why we stay, tolerate, or even normalize it. Today, we're not here to judge others, we're here to understand patterns, to recognize emotional truths, and to gently reclaim our sense of worth. Because when you truly see what indifference looks like, you also begin to see what you deserve instead. They are emotionally unavailable when you need them most, and this absence is not always loud or dramatic. In fact, it often shows up in quiet, subtle ways that are easy to overlook at first. You might find yourself reaching out during moments of vulnerability, hoping for understanding, comfort, or even just a listening ear, but instead you are met with silence, distraction, or a response that feels distant and mechanical. It is not that they are physically absent all the time, sometimes they are right there, sitting next to you, yet emotionally they feel miles away. This kind of disconnection creates a deep sense of loneliness that is difficult to explain, because from the outside, everything may appear normal. Emotional unavailability often reveals itself in moments that truly matter. When you are struggling, overwhelmed, or simply in need of support, their inability to be present becomes undeniable. They may change the subject, offer surface-level responses, or avoid engaging with your emotions altogether. Over time, you begin to notice a pattern where your deepest feelings are never fully received. This can lead you to question yourself, wondering if you are asking for too much or expecting something unreasonable. Even though the need for emotional connection is a basic human requirement, there is also a certain inconsistency that comes with this behavior. At times, they may appear attentive or even caring, giving you just enough to keep you hopeful. But when it truly counts, when the situation calls for genuine empathy and presence, they withdraw. This inconsistency can be confusing, because it creates a cycle where you keep trying to reconnect, believing that maybe next time will be different. You may find yourself adjusting your expectations, lowering your needs, or convincing yourself to accept less than what you truly deserve, simply to maintain the connection. Emotionally unavailable people often struggle to sit with discomfort, both their own and yours. When faced with strong emotions, they may feel overwhelmed or incapable of responding in a meaningful way, so they choose avoidance instead. This avoidance is not always intentional or malicious, but its impact is real. It leaves you feeling unsupported and unseen, as if your inner world does not matter enough to be acknowledged. Over time, this can erode your sense of self-worth, making you feel like your emotions are a burden rather than something valid and important. Another aspect of this behavior is the lack of depth in communication. Conversations may remain on the surface, focused on practical matters or casual topics, while anything deeper is quickly brushed aside. You may notice that when you try to express something personal or meaningful, the response lacks curiosity or engagement. This absence of emotional depth creates a barrier that prevents true connection from forming, leaving the relationship feeling hollow and unfulfilling. As this pattern continues, you may begin to internalize the experience. You might stop sharing your feelings altogether, believing that there is no point, or that your emotions are not worth the effort. This self-silencing becomes a way of protecting yourself from further disappointment, but it also disconnects you from your own needs. Instead of asking for what you require, you adapt to what is available, even if it is insufficient. The reality is that emotional availability is not just about being present during easy or enjoyable moments. It is about showing up when things are difficult, when emotions are intense, and when vulnerability is required. When someone consistently fails to meet you in those moments, it reflects a limitation in their capacity to connect, not a flaw in your need for connection. Your feelings are consistently dismissed or minimized, and this pattern often unfolds in ways that are easy to rationalize at first. It may begin with small comments, phrases like "you're overthinking," "it's not a big deal," or "you're too sensitive." These responses can seem harmless on the surface, even casual, but over time they begin to shape how you relate to your own emotional experience. Instead of feeling heard, you feel corrected. Instead of feeling supported, you feel subtly judged for having emotions at all. When someone minimizes your feelings, they are not engaging with your inner reality. They are, in a sense, rewriting it. Your experience is replaced with their interpretation, and your emotional truth is reduced to something insignificant or exaggerated. This creates a kind of internal confusion. You start to question whether what you feel is valid, whether your reactions are appropriate, or whether you are somehow flawed for experiencing things so deeply. This self-doubt does not arise because your emotions are wrong, but because they are not being reflected back to you with understanding. Dismissal can also take the form of indifference. You might share something important, something that required courage to express and receive a response that feels flat, distracted, or completely unrelated. There is no curiosity, no attempt to understand the context or depth of what you are saying. It is as if your words pass through them without leaving any impact. This lack of engagement can feel even more painful than direct criticism, because it sends the message that your feelings are not even worth acknowledging. Over time, this dynamic can lead you to suppress your emotions. You begin to filter what you say, choosing only the parts that seem acceptable or unlikely to be dismissed. The more vulnerable aspects of your experience remain unspoken, not because they are unimportant, but because you have learned that they will not be received with care. This self-censorship becomes a coping mechanism, a way to avoid the discomfort of being invalidated again and again. There is also a subtle shift that happens in your relationship with yourself. When your feelings are repeatedly minimized, you may start to internalize that same dismissive voice. You become your own critic, telling yourself that you are overreacting or making something out of nothing. Instead of offering yourself compassion, you mirror the lack of empathy you have experienced. This internalization can be deeply damaging, because it disconnects you from your own emotional needs and makes it harder to recognize when something is truly wrong. Another aspect of this behavior is the absence of accountability. When someone dismisses your feelings, they often avoid taking responsibility for how their actions may have affected you. Rather than listening and reflecting, they may become defensive or shift the focus back onto you. The conversation becomes less about understanding and more about deflecting, leaving you feeling unheard and unresolved. This lack of accountability reinforces the idea that your emotions are not important enough to warrant consideration. In a healthy dynamic, feelings are not always agreed with, but they are acknowledged. There is space for expression, for clarification, and for mutual understanding. When that space is consistently denied, the relationship begins to feel one-sided, where your emotional world is overlooked while theirs remains intact and unquestioned. The imbalance grows quietly, shaping the way you communicate, the way you feel, and the way you see yourself within the connection. The consistent dismissal of your feelings does not make them any less real or meaningful, but it can make you feel as though they are invisible, as though your inner experience exists in a place where it cannot be seen or valued. They only show up when it benefits them. And this pattern can be difficult to recognize at first because it often hides behind moments of charm, attention, or apparent care. In the beginning, their presence may feel genuine. They reach out, they engage, they seem interested. But over time, a subtle imbalance begins to reveal itself. Their availability is not consistent, it is conditional. It depends on what they need, what they want, or what they can gain from the interaction. You might notice that they are quick to appear when they require support, validation, or assistance. In those moments, they know how to connect, how to communicate, how to draw you in. They may share their struggles, ask for your time, or rely on your emotional presence. And because you value the connection, you respond. You listen, you help, you give. But when the roles are reversed, when you are the one in need, their presence fades. They become distant, unavailable, or suddenly preoccupied with other priorities. This creates a one-sided dynamic where giving flows in one direction while receiving becomes rare or uncertain. You begin to feel like a resource rather than a person, someone who is valued for what they provide rather than who they are. The connection starts to feel transactional, even if it is never openly acknowledged. There is an unspoken understanding that your role is to be there for them, while their role remains undefined or inconsistent. Over time, this pattern can lead to emotional exhaustion. You may find yourself constantly adjusting, always ready to show up, always willing to give, hoping that your efforts will eventually be reciprocated. But the more you give, the more the imbalance deepens. Instead of creating closeness, it reinforces a dynamic where your needs are secondary. You may begin to feel drained, not just because of what you are giving, but because of what you are not receiving in return. There is also a sense of unpredictability that comes with this behavior. You never quite know when they will be present or absent, engaged or distant. This inconsistency can keep you emotionally invested as you hold on to the moments when they do show up, using them as proof that they care. You might tell yourself that they are just busy or that they will be more available in the future. But the pattern remains, repeating itself in ways that are difficult to ignore once you begin to see it clearly. Another layer of this dynamic is the way they respond to boundaries. When you start to pull back or express your own needs, they may react with surprise, frustration, or even guilt-inducing behavior. Because they are accustomed to receiving without consistently giving, any shift in that pattern can feel uncomfortable to them. They may attempt to re-establish the dynamic by drawing you back into your previous role, not necessarily out of awareness, but out of habit. This behavior often reflects a deeper inability or unwillingness to engage in mutual connection. It is not simply about being busy or having limited time, it is about where they choose to invest their energy. When someone consistently shows up only when it benefits them, it reveals a pattern of self-centered engagement, where the relationship revolves around their needs rather than a shared sense of care and reciprocity. As you become more aware of this pattern, you may start to question the nature of the connection itself. What once felt meaningful may begin to feel conditional, shaped more by convenience than genuine care. The realization can be uncomfortable because it challenges the assumptions you may have held about the relationship and forces you to see it in a more honest and sometimes more difficult light. There is no genuine effort to understand you, and this absence often reveals itself not through conflict, but through a quiet lack of curiosity. In any meaningful connection, there is a natural desire to know the other person, not just their surface-level preferences, but their inner world, their thoughts, their fears, their values. When that effort is missing, the relationship begins to feel shallow, as though you are present but not truly seen. You may find that conversations rarely move beyond the predictable. They ask the usual questions, but there is no depth behind them, no follow-up, no attempt to explore what lies beneath your answers. When you share something personal, it does not lead to further understanding or connection. Instead, it often fades quickly, as if it was never important to begin with. This lack of engagement creates a subtle distance, one that grows over time, as you realize that your experiences are not being held with genuine interest. Understanding someone requires attention, patience, and emotional presence. It involves listening not just to respond, but to truly comprehend what the other person is expressing. When someone lacks this intention, their listening becomes passive or selective. They may hear your words, but they do not absorb their meaning. Important details are forgotten, emotions are overlooked, and patterns in your experiences go unnoticed. This can make you feel invisible, as though your inner life exists in a space that they are unwilling or unable to enter. There is also a tendency for them to interpret you through their own lens rather than seeking clarity. Instead of asking questions or inviting you to elaborate, they make assumptions. These assumptions may be based on their own beliefs, experiences, or expectations, but they often miss the essence of who you are. You might find yourself being misunderstood repeatedly, not because you are unclear, but because there is no real effort to understand you accurately. Over time, this can become frustrating, as you are constantly trying to correct a version of yourself that they have created. In such a dynamic, you may begin to over-explain. You put more effort into your communication, hoping that if you say things in the right way, they will finally understand. You clarify, you repeat, you try different approaches, but the outcome remains the same. The issue is not in how you express yourself, but in their lack of willingness to truly receive what you are sharing. This realization can be difficult because it shifts the focus away from self-improvement and toward the limitations of the other person's engagement. Another aspect of this behavior is the absence of empathy. Understanding is closely tied to the ability to empathize, to step into someone else's perspective and feel with them. When this is missing, your emotions may be acknowledged in a superficial way, but not truly felt or validated. There is a disconnect between what you express and what they are able to resonate with. This lack of empathy creates a barrier that prevents deeper connection, leaving interactions feeling incomplete and unsatisfying. As time passes, you may start to withdraw parts of yourself, not because you have less to share, but because sharing begins to feel pointless. When there is no genuine effort to understand you, vulnerability loses its meaning. It becomes something you offer without receiving anything in return. You may still engage in the relationship, but with a reduced sense of openness, holding back the parts of yourself that require care and attention. The absence of genuine understanding does not always come with obvious conflict or tension. It often exists quietly, shaping the quality of the connection in subtle but significant ways. It is felt in the lack of depth, in the missed opportunities for connection, and in the growing sense that who you truly are is not being recognized or valued. Your presence feels optional, not valued, and this realization does not usually arrive all at once. It builds slowly, through repeated experiences where you begin to notice that your absence would not significantly change anything for them. You are there, you contribute, you show up, but it does not seem to matter in a meaningful way. There is no sense that your presence adds something unique or irreplaceable to their life. Instead, it feels interchangeable, as though anyone else could fill your place and the dynamic would remain the same. This often shows up in how little effort is made to maintain connection. Plans are easily canceled, messages go unanswered for long periods, and there is rarely any urgency in responding to you. You may find yourself always being the one to initiate contact, to check in, to keep the interaction alive. And even when you do, the response you receive feels minimal, as if it requires the least possible investment of time and energy. Over time, this lack of effort sends a clear message, not through words, but through behavior, that your presence is not something they actively seek or prioritize. There is also a noticeable absence of acknowledgement. In healthy connections, people recognize each other's value. They express appreciation. They notice contributions. They make the other person feel seen. When your presence is treated as optional, this acknowledgement is missing. The things you do, the support you offer, the energy you bring, all of it seems to go unnoticed. It is not that you are invisible, but rather that you are not being truly recognized for who you are and what you give. You may also sense that they are just as comfortable without you as they are with you, and not in a healthy, independent way, but in a detached, indifferent way. There is no sign that they miss you, no indication that your absence creates a gap. This can be deeply unsettling because it challenges your sense of importance within the relationship. You begin to question whether you matter at all, or whether you have simply become a convenient part of their routine rather than someone they genuinely value. Another layer of this experience is the imbalance in emotional investment. You may find yourself thinking about them more, caring more, putting in more effort to understand and support them. Meanwhile, their level of engagement remains low and inconsistent. This imbalance can create a sense of emotional vulnerability, where you feel exposed in your care while they remain distant and unaffected. It becomes clear that the connection does not hold the same weight for both of you. As this pattern continues, it can start to affect how you see yourself. When your presence is not valued, it is easy to internalize that message and begin to believe that you are not worth prioritizing. You may lower your expectations, accept less attention, and convince yourself that this is simply how relationships are. This adjustment is not a reflection of your true worth, but rather a response to the environment you are in. You adapt to the level of value you are given, even when it does not match what you truly deserve. There is also a quiet form of emotional distance that comes with feeling optional. You may still be physically present, still interacting, still participating in the connection, but something within you begins to withdraw. The enthusiasm fades, the openness decreases, and the sense of belonging diminishes. You start to feel like an outsider within something that once felt close, as though you are on the edges rather than at the center of the connection. When someone treats your presence as optional, it reflects a lack of intentionality in the relationship. It shows that they are not actively choosing you, not making space for you in a meaningful way, and not recognizing the significance of your role in their life. They avoid accountability and shift blame onto you, and this pattern can be especially confusing because it distorts your sense of reality over time. When something goes wrong in the relationship, instead of acknowledging their role, they redirect the focus toward you. The conversation is no longer about what actually happened, but about how you reacted, what you said, or how you made them feel. In this way, responsibility is quietly transferred, leaving you carrying the weight of situations that were never entirely yours to begin with. At first, this behavior may not be obvious. It can appear as defensiveness, as a need to explain or justify their actions. But as it repeats, a pattern begins to form. Every issue somehow circles back to you. If you express hurt, they point out your tone. If you raise a concern, they highlight your timing. If you ask for clarity, they question your intentions. The original issue becomes lost, replaced by a new focus where your behavior is examined instead of theirs. This dynamic creates a sense of imbalance where you are constantly placed in a position of self-examination while they remain largely unexamined. You may find yourself apologizing even when you are not entirely sure what you did wrong. The need to restore peace or avoid conflict can push you to take responsibility just to move forward, even if it means ignoring your own perspective. Over time, this habit of over-apologizing can erode your confidence in your own judgment. There is also a subtle form of manipulation that can emerge within this pattern. When blame is consistently shifted, it can make you question your memory or interpretation of events. You may start to wonder if you misunderstood the situation, if you reacted too strongly, or if you are the source of the problem. This self-doubt is not a reflection of your inability to understand, but rather the result of repeated redirection that prevents clarity from taking hold. Avoiding accountability also means avoiding growth. When someone refuses to acknowledge their role in a problem, they remove the opportunity to learn, to adjust, and to improve the dynamic. The same issues tend to repeat, not because they cannot be resolved, but because they are never fully addressed. This repetition can be exhausting as you find yourself having the same conversations, facing the same outcomes, and feeling the same unresolved emotions. Another aspect of this behavior is the way it impacts communication. Honest and open dialogue becomes difficult when one person is unwilling to take responsibility. Conversations may become tense or circular, where no real progress is made. You may hesitate to bring up concerns, knowing that they will likely be turned back onto you. This hesitation can lead to suppression of important feelings, further deepening the disconnect within the relationship. As time passes, you may begin to carry an unfair share of emotional responsibility. You become the one who reflects, who adjusts, who tries to fix what is broken. Meanwhile, their role remains unchanged, protected by their avoidance of accountability. This imbalance can leave you feeling overwhelmed, as though the health of the relationship depends solely on your efforts. The absence of accountability does not just affect individual situations, it shapes the entire dynamic of the connection. It creates an environment where truth becomes unclear, responsibility is unevenly distributed, and genuine resolution remains out of reach.